The Kansas City Chiefs are primed to defend their kingdom and their crown. Can they get it done? Can this Kansas City Chiefs team be the first team to repeat since my beloved New England Patriots, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick in 2003 and 2004? There are plenty of comparisons going around between Patrick Mahonmes and Tom Brady. So, if there is a team that can pull it off, if there is a franchise currently in the NFL that can repeat, it's one that is as fundamentally strong, as culturally strong, season to season, consistent, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahonmes, Travis Kelce, and the Chiefs. It would be this team. I mean, after all, they won the Super Bowl in 2019, right? And then we do forget that they did make it back to the Super Bowl in 2020. They didn't win, but lucky for them, they don't have to deal with Tom Brady anymore. So that guy's not going to be on the other side of that Super Bowl potentially this time around. To me, this team is very comparable to one like the Seattle Seahawks in 2013 because it's a young team with a bunch of superstars and a bunch of great talent that could be ascending. And if you recall, think back to that Seahawks team, that was a young core of players that were all hitting their stride at the right time. They weren't able to repeat in 2014, but they were close. And this team kind of reminds me of that one. It's not a champion that got all the pieces at the right time. It's almost one of those teams. This Chiefs team is almost one of those teams that feels like they weren't supposed to win the Super Bowl this year. They weren't supposed to be there. A lot of people picked them to not be there. And those are arguably the teams that are the most dangerous the year after. The teams that actually sometimes get better. You know, look at Cincinnati, for example, this past season. They weren't a very good team the year they went to the Super Bowl. They kind of put together a run. But then, of course, injuries struck this year, and they fell to the Chiefs. I almost look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers of 2020. They were a wild card team that made a run, a historic run, right? And they won the Super Bowl versus your Chiefs. In 2021, a lot of people, including myself, would argue that their roster, their team was better than the one in 2020. But they had some injuries, some AB taking his helmet off, all his clothes off, leaving the field. Godwin got injured, stuff of that nature happened, and the Rams, of course, beat them and move and win the Super Bowl. So that's the biggest thing for me. It's like sometimes there are teams that maybe aren't necessary, like, they're not necessarily supposed to win. But then those are the teams that could go on to launch dynasties. I mean, 2001 Patriots, for example. So it's a tricky conversation because you have to be healthy enough. You have to be lucky enough. And you also have to be stable enough. You have to have all of those factors. We know that the Chiefs are culturally very strong. We know that the Chiefs have a great quarterback. We know the Chiefs have a great coach. We know the Chiefs have great players. Can they get lucky enough? Can they be healthy enough? Those are the two primary factors for me for this Chiefs team. And those are things that we don't really know what's going to take place. The Chiefs were a pretty fortunate team this year. They were fortunate from the injury standpoint. They really didn't lose any key pieces to their run to the Super Bowl this year. They did in 2020. Remember, their offensive line got injured. That's a big reason that game was a blowout. Not saying they would have beat the Bucs if they would have had those players, but it was a big reason it was a blowout for sure. So they weren't fortunate in 2020. Can they be more fortunate in 2023? That is usually the most difficult aspect because you're playing all of this football consecutively. You're playing more games than anybody else in the league. You're taking more hits. You're taking more snaps. Can they have the luck, the ball bounce their way? Sometimes one play decides a game. Sometimes a call decides the game. So luck is also involved here as well. But all the pieces, all the primary players that allowed the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl this year are returning for 2023. Except for maybe Eric Bieniemy, who could move on to maybe Washington, for example, and become their offensive coordinator. I don't know how big of a part Eric Bieniemy has been to the Chiefs' success, but we will not know until he leaves, to be honest. I kind of think it's mostly Andy Reid, but we won't know until he leaves. Everybody else will be there. Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo will still be there on the defensive side of the football. You got Mahomes, you got Kelsey, you got Chris Jones, you got Tooney, you got Humphrey. All those guys are going to be there. And then on top of that, you have the young players that are going to hopefully, not always, but you would suggest or think that the young players in Kansas City would get better and take a step forward. McDuffie, Cook, Karlaftis, Leo Chanel, all these players, Watson, from rookies to sophomores. That's the thing with the Chiefs. The Chiefs had an incredible draft, specifically on defense this past season. They drafted McDuffie, Karlaftis in the first round, Brian Cook, Leo Chanel, who could take a bigger step in year 2. They drafted Jalen Watson, a steal in the 7th round. Can those players continue to develop? There's going to be one or two that maybe hit that sophomore slump, but you're hoping that McDuffie can become a number 1 corner next year. You're hoping that Karlaftis can become your number 2 pass rusher outside of Chris Jones next year. You're hoping that Brian Cook can step up and play more snaps more regularly for your defense, right? And then you also got guys like Snead. You got guys like Dana. You got guys like Bolton and Willie G. All these players are getting a little bit older and they're entering their prime. All of these players will be on the roster. So really, when you look at it defensively, that is where this Chiefs team needs to be able to break out. Take that next step. Because the Chiefs this year defensively were just okay. They were just okay. They weren't great. And you might argue they were a little bit below average, but towards the end of the year, they got a lot better and they started to make plays when they needed to make plays. And I would expect this Chiefs defense to be better, just logically. There's a lot of young players. They're going to be in the second year of their system. There's going to be players in their prime, like I just suggested, the linebackers at the secondary level. So all these players should be on the rise defensively. Okay? And then you get to talking, well, who are they going to lose or who could they potentially lose? Because every year there are free agents that are from that Super Bowl team that are paid probably more than they deserve. There's players that leave, there's players that stay, but typically they make a lot more money because they won a Super Bowl. I mean, it makes sense, right? It makes sense. But you look at the free agent list for the Chiefs, and you have starters that are free agents. Both of their tackles, Orlando Brown and Andrew Wiley, are both going to be free agents. So they've got to figure that out. They've got to fix the tackle position. Orlando Brown could become one of the highest paid tackles in the NFL. Are the Chiefs willing to do that? Or are they going to have to draft a tackle? Are they going to have to trade for a tackle on another team? Andrew Wiley is pretty much replaceable, in my opinion. But he was also very solid in the playoffs and definitely helped them on that offensive line. And if he's back, he keeps the continuity of that offensive line. I would say Orlando Brown's a lot more difficult to replace, especially considering I believe they traded a first-round pick for him a year or two ago. Juju Smith-Schuster was their leading receiver, wide receiver, in the Super Bowl. But Juju is a guy that signed a one-year contract, a guy that you would think would probably be replaceable. They did trade for Kadarius Toney to maybe resume that slot position. So if Juju is paid somewhere else and cashes in on that one-year deal from the Super Bowl win with the Chiefs, then you could replace him maybe with Kadarius Toney, who's been inconsistent, unreliable from an injury standpoint, but very talented. Sky Moore is also somebody that you would expect to take a jump in year 2 as well. Derek Nandi is a big run stuffer, and when you look at this graphic here, 3 defensive tackles are free agents, so that's a big position for them to definitely take a look at and replace some players. Jerick McKinnon was key in the third down back role, the receiving back role. Not a very effective rusher, but definitely will have to be replaced if he's going to leave. But I'd expect them to get him pretty cheap back next year. Juan Thornhill could be a guy. He'd probably be the prime suspect I look at on this list. I think they're going to let Mecole Hardman leave. I think Carlos Dunlap could retire. Deion Bush, Justin Watson, key special teams contributors. And Watson was actually a nice receiver for them in moments. But Juan Thornhill, to me, is the guy that I would say, if there's anybody on that list that maybe they let go because he's just going to get too much money on the open market. I mean, PFF ranked him as like a top 20 safety in the NFL this past year. I could see a team looking for a safety, wanting to pay him because he's just entering his prime, and maybe the Chiefs choose to let him go. Brian Cook is going to be there along with Justin Reed, who they already paid a lot of money. So how much money are they going to invest in the safety position? Maybe they draft a safety in the second round or whatever. So I could see them maybe letting him walk out of all of these guys. But there's definitely big questions when it comes to tackle, when it comes to wide receiver, and specifically offense. I don't think the Chiefs are going to have to do a ton on defense because they already put so many assets into the defensive side of the football, but they could continue to do so in the interior defensive line and at cornerback and probably at safety this offseason. But tackle's going to have to be figured out, and then addressing wide receiver, determining whether you're going to draft one, who's going to step up, if Juju's coming back or not, if you're going to make a trade. Those things are definitely going to have to be factored in. So that's what I look at. They have the 12th most cap space in the NFL, $11 million, so they have enough money to pick and choose who they want to bring back, and probably not enough money to bring back everybody. So they're going to have to be careful with what they do. But the biggest thing with these type of teams, these teams that are on that championship window, is not falling in love with your own players, being willing to let some walk, and then also be willing to look at those cheap free agents, understanding that you have Patrick Mahonmes, you've got a big magnet with your franchise that everybody wants to play with Patrick Mahonmes. So you're able to pick and choose these maybe older free agents on one-year contracts that can help you play year to year at a specific position. Maybe you could find a safety. Maybe you can find a veteran corner. Maybe you can find a veteran defensive lineman that wants to play for a chance at a championship. This is what the Patriots benefited from for 15 years. So that's something that the Chiefs will have to definitely get into. And they did a little bit last year, more so than any year, trying to go after a Carlos Dunlap, trying to get a Brandon Williams, trying to get a Juju. There's a lot of players that definitely signed up to become a Chief because on cheap deals because of Mahomes. So that's definitely a factor. Now, taking a look at the historic precedent of championship teams and favorites, this is something that I found kind of interesting, just taking a look at where the Chiefs land in terms of how heavily they are favored, because they are Vegas's favorite to repeat, to win the Super Bowl. And there have been teams that have won the championship and then were the preseason favorite to win again. You're taking a look at the Seahawks in 2014. You're looking at the Patriots numerous times, and the Chiefs even in 2020. So the Chiefs were favored in the year after they won the Super Bowl, but they're about the same, heavy favorite that they were then. So expecting the Chiefs to go back, expecting the Chiefs to win, and that number has kind of been up and down as of late. This is a tough conference, the AFC, but they're right in there with some of the heaviest favorites that we've seen. The Patriots in 2017 were the heaviest favorite going into a season that already won the championship the year before. The ones that are starred next to them are the only teams that actually won the Super Bowl after being the preseason favorites, and both of them were the Patriots in 2016 and 2018. So only 2 out of those teams actually won the Super Bowl. But again, if any team can do it, it might be the Chiefs. Now, again, going back to that conversation with injuries, because I think injuries and luck play a major factor. And a couple teams that didn't benefit from injuries and luck are in your conference. You know, when you really think about it, I've said this a few times throughout the offseason already. There were 3 teams we thought could represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. There was the Chiefs, there was the Bengals, and there was the Bills. If you chose any other team, you're probably lying to yourself, right? The Bills dealt with injuries. Micah Hyde, Von Miller, a few others. Cincinnati Bengals had their entire offensive line basically go on IR, right? The Chiefs were the healthy one. They came out on top. They won the Super Bowl. So injuries are a huge factor. As we saw in 2020, the Chiefs weren't able to stay healthy. That cost them. So injuries are a huge factor. You can't really say that the Bengals, the Bills, even the Ravens stayed healthy. Now, the other thing I think is interesting is, can the Chiefs maintain as the number 1 seed? Because I think a big factor in the Chiefs going back to the Super Bowl will be playing these top teams in their building. As we've seen, Patrick Mahonmes, I don't know if you guys know this, has never actually played a road playoff game in his entire career so far. You know, even the Patriots with Tom Brady played 2 AFC championships in 01 and 04 in his first 4 years on the road. Mahomes hasn't done that yet. So maintaining that supremacy throughout the regular season is a big deal. So looking at the schedule for the Chiefs this year, or the opponents, we don't know the exact schedule yet, but that doesn't really matter. It's more about the opponents. And of course, we don't really know how good these teams will be. I starred the teams that did make the playoffs this year, and there are 8 of them. So they're going to be playing 8 teams that made the playoffs this past season. The Chargers twice, the Bengals, the Eagles, the Dolphins, Jacksonville, Minnesota. When you look at this schedule, I think it's fairly reasonable. They play more games at home than they do away, of course, with the unbalanced schedule. They also play, a pretty easy road schedule. I don't think their road schedule, which is on the right, is as hard as their home schedule. So they have tougher opponents at home, which is beneficial. I always take a look at that. They play the Eagles at home. They play the Dolphins at home, the Lions at home, the Bengals at home, the Bills at home, the Chargers, the Broncos, all those teams at home. They play the Broncos on the road as well. But those teams, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 playoff teams from this past season. And then you add in the Lions, who could be a good team too, at home. You look at the away schedule, I think there are some tough places to play. Green Bay, if they have Aaron Rodgers, is always tough. New England is always tough. Minnesota is tough with that crowd and that building. I'm not sure about Jacksonville. Maybe. It can be a weird place to play. And you got to play the Jets defense at least. So not super easy. There's no easy team on this schedule other than maybe the Bears and possibly the Raiders. Other than that, I think this is a fairly tough schedule. This is a first place schedule, and you're playing some of the best teams in the NFL. The only really good teams you don't play are Dallas, the Niners, and the Ravens, really. I think that's about it. But you basically play everybody else on that schedule. So it's not an easy schedule. Winning those games at home versus those tough opponents are going to be crucial to getting that number 1 seed. As Peyton Manning once said, he always knew that playing the Patriots was the biggest game of the year because that would determine who would have home field in the playoffs. And for the Chiefs, they're starring those games against the Bills. They're starring those games against the Bengals because they know that the winner of those games, even though it didn't this year, is most likely going to host the playoffs in the AFC. And I'm pretty sure that the way the schedule worked out for the Chiefs this year is not going to happen. At least we hope it doesn't happen this year with what happened between the Bills and the Bengals. So, yeah. Now let's get to some of the primary competition that could knock the Chiefs off and knock the Chiefs out of the potential to repeat. So some of those teams include, of course, the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are that team that won the AFC the year previous. And I think this is the team that most likely could beat the Chiefs because they've done it in the playoffs. They've done it a couple times in the regular season. And I believe the record is now 3-1, Burrow versus Mahonmes. And like we said, the Bengals were missing Chidobe Awuzie and their offensive line in the AFC Championship, which they will be getting those players back. But the bigger thing here is they also have a very reasonable cap situation, and they don't have that many free agents. So Jesse Bates and Von Bell, two of their starting safeties, are free agents. I'm expecting they both come back, but I don't think Jesse Bates will be cheap. I think Jesse Bates will go for a pretty penny. Hayden Hurst was a very nice player for them this year, and I think that would be a big loss if they were to lose him. The rest of the players, Eli Apple, Samaje Perine, Jermaine Pratt, are not too big of losses. I think they'll try to keep Perine, especially with what's going on with Mixon and Jermaine Pratt, but Eli Apple, I'm not so sure they want that distraction any longer, but yeah, that is a team that could knock them off. I would say that's their primary competition. After that, you've got the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills, of course, are a big competition because they got Josh Allen, who's a premier quarterback in this league. But their cap space situation is not looking so hot. Now, they will get Von Miller back. They will get Micah Hyde back, but they've got some big free agents. Jordan Poyer is a free agent who's been a steady force for them at safety throughout his career. Tremaine Edmonds is a young, really up-and-coming stud at linebacker. He's a good player. I wouldn't say he's a great player. He's inconsistent, but he is a crucial player for them. They may let him walk just because of how much he will get on the open market. Jordan Phillips is replaceable. Roger Saffold didn't play so well this year. Shaq Lawson is a role player. Devin Singletary is a replaceable running back. Maybe he comes back, maybe he doesn't. But it's primarily the top two. But the biggest thing with the Bills for me is they might lose a lot of the depth that they had this year, which is really why this year was so crucial for them to win the Super Bowl. They're going to have a good draft. And the final team that I think is like a primary competitor, but there's others that we'll get to. The Baltimore Ravens are, I think, a competitor if they maintain Lamar Jackson, because let's remember, they were basically a 1 yard line, a fumble for 99 yards away from beating the Bengals in the playoffs, and the Bengals destroyed the Bills, and Lamar wasn't playing. So they have very good defense. They've got a good coach, and they got a new OC that I like. But Marcus Peters, Justin Houston, two big assets that they should re-sign. They've got a pretty good cap situation. Ben Powers is a starting guard for them. Kyle Fuller and Jason Pierre-Paul probably won't be back. But if they can get Lamar back, we know what he can do. He's pretty special. Marcus Peters, Justin Houston would help that defense, and Ben Powers at guard. Maybe they let him walk because he's a good player that may get more money elsewhere. But the Ravens, with what they have defensively, and what they have potentially with this new offense, along with Lamar Jackson back and healthy, would be a tough out for sure. Those are the primary competitors. Other competitors that you could see, of course, the Chargers in your own division, who have a ton of talent and a great quarterback, but not necessarily the clutch gene, let's just say. Jacksonville, who played you very well in the divisional round, will get Calvin Ridley. That's a tricky team to deal with, especially Doug Peterson, knowing Andy Reid so well. Miami, New England are teams that I would also look out for in the AFC. New England because of Belichick and because of the defense, and then also you would expect the offense to be better under Bill O'Brien. Miami because of the explosiveness on offense, and probably getting better on defense with Vic Fangio. So this AFC as a whole is very tough. That's not even including teams like Cleveland, teams like the Steelers. There's a lot of good teams. The Jets. in the AFC. There's a lot of good teams in this conference. So that's going to be one of the biggest things that they have to overcome. The hurdle of how good this conference is. It's not the NFC, where pretty much I feel like if the Chiefs were in the NFC, I'd pretty much lock them into a Super Bowl. Unless Trey Lance becomes something special, and then maybe we could talk. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So in conclusion, guys, history would suggest that it's unlikely that the Chiefs will do this. History would tell us that the Chiefs are not going to repeat. But I feel like the Chiefs are a rare case because they have a lot of young talent that should be ascending. And they have a very good coach-quarterback combo. And other than the Patriots, that's typically not the case. Now, even the Patriots did not repeat since 03 and 04. So that's important to understand. But I really feel like it's going to come down to health and luck. And the bounce of the ball. Because if the Bengals are healthy and you're not, you're probably going to lose to the Bengals. If the Bills are healthy and you're not, you're probably going to lose to the Bills. I don't think you're so superior that you can overcome key losses. But maintaining all health, I feel like the Chiefs have as good of a shot as anyone in the last 10 plus years of possibly repeating. They do have that chance. So I think they're as well situated as anybody to get this thing done. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you think the Chiefs can repeat in 2023? Do you think they will be able to become Super Bowl champs in back-to-back seasons? I think it's important to understand that they were a bit fortunate from a luck perspective. And maybe they put a little bit of cash in the pockets of the refs. Just kidding. But if they can maintain that, and they do get a little bit better, because that's always possible, their roster could actually get better heading into this next year. They could be a team that could repeat. All right, guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, don't forget to Gronk spike the like button and subscribe for more NFL, more BLV just like this. Moving forward, I'm trying to attempt to do 2 videos a day, and my goal is to do 1 recorded video and 1 live video every single day moving forward until I say so. So I hope that sounds good, and if you want to see more content, do support Gronk spike the like button, do subscribe, do Gronk spike the notification bell, guys. Thank you so much for watching. It's Mitch. Appreciate you, and we'll see you soon. Peace!